All right. Well, we will get started. It's right at 7, so we're doing good. All right. Hope that y'all have had a good week and enjoying the nice cool start to summer. But I turned on. I was coming in here to turn on the air conditioner today, and at that moment got an email from whoever our provider is, that's saying, we request you to, use as little as you can. I'm like, from like 4 to 8. It's like, yeah, that's when you need it. So it's definitely been on the warm side, but looking forward to tonight, and thank you for joining us for our Truth Seekers. So I kind of struggled with what to talk about today, and I'm a little bit over my skis on some of the stuff. So I know some of this, but a lot of this is just going to kind of be some bullet points, and then we may end up getting into it deeper as we go. But I'll kind of try to I'll try to give you my thought process, because it was kind of all over the place, because I had a few areas that I was going to go. But it started off, this weekend, the Los Angeles Dodgers had where they recognized this this very crazy, were they the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, right? And so this was their Pride Night, but they were going a little above and beyond, and they were honoring groups who supported LGBTQ things in the community. Well, they had invited this group, and then they disinvited them, and then they invited them back. And the reason for the controversy is this is a crazy group. Like, I don't like the term hate speech, because it's like anything can be determined hate speech. But if you have something that's called hate speech, this group participated in it, right? They didn't just dress up as nuns. They were overtly sacrilegious, to the point of, in open events, having Jesus and Mary use the cross as a stripper pole, right? Not to get too in depth, but I mean, we're talking pretty horrendous stuff. And so to honor them is very strange, right? And so the Dodgers have just been trying to do all they can and they actually, it's funny, they actually honored them. It was like 45 minutes before first pitch. So the stadium was basically empty. And it did end up, there were thousands of people who gathered at the stadium in protest of it. So there were some good things about that as well. But one thing that really was very disheartening to me, and I'm going to read two things, one from just a Facebook post. There's still an uncomfortable amount of Christians who don't understand the danger that we're facing, right? And so this is an actual letter that was written to the Dodgers in support of them having the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And it says, I'm a member of the Sisters of Loretto, a Roman Catholic congregation of religious women. I've been a Catholic nun for more than 60 years, ministered to and with the LGBT Catholic community for more than 50 years. So while I'm uncomfortable with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence using the nuns' old garb to draw attention to bigotry, whether Catholic or not, this is the hierarchy of values in this situation. There is a hierarchy of values in this situation. The choice of clothing, even though offensive to some, can never trump the works of mercy. First off, the clothing is not the issue here, really, right? I mean, there's a whole lot more here. But this is a terrifying mindset. It says, just as I have great respect for Catholic nuns because of their compassion and good works over the centuries, I applaud the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence for their financial assistance to those in need. I support them because of all their good works. I believe that any group that serves the community, especially those who are less fortunate or on the margins of society, should be honored. So say the Nazi Party supports the poor better than someone else, so you support them? I mean, this is such a scary and ignorant, but it does make you feel good, right? It's like, because you like back up, well, you know what, they're doing some good in the community. Now, notice it doesn't list what good they're doing in the community. So whether they even are or not, I don't know. But that's a terrifying understanding and a way to look at things. And I'm not going to question. I don't know this lady's background and stuff like that. If she's been a nun, she has at least committed to the faith in some way, but now has a very misguided understanding of faith. And then there was a post on Facebook, and it kind of, in a way, from a more evangelical viewpoint, misses the importance of what's going on and the culture war, if you will, that we're in. It says, it didn't hit me until recently that Jesus' 12 disciples probably had moments of conflict amongst themselves. Devout Jews, a zealot, tax collector, lots of places for division and contention, and yet they were all united in the fact that they followed Jesus. True. Let's not forget the Samaritan woman, or the fact that Jesus was controversial with the Pharisees for keeping company with non-religious people. If I truly believe that God so loved the world, that means everyone. And if the scripture states that God's kindness leads to repentance, wouldn't it make sense for us as believers to lean on the fruit of the Spirit to display God's love, rather than fostering a mentality of culture war? Now, I can empathize with that. I want that to be the case. I want it to be the case that we can just be nice to people and everything's going to be fine. And our goal should be to try to be able to be nice to people and to treat people with respect. What this doesn't understand is that we're facing an evil agenda. We are facing something bigger. It's not, you can't look at it as individuals. In fact, when you look at it as individuals, in a sense, that is true. You need to treat individuals with kindness and respect in a one-on-one setting. But when we're talking about bigger issues, you have to recognize who the enemy is and what it's trying to do, and that there is something bigger going on out there. So I was thinking about that, and so then my mind just starts going, and a lot of things start coming to mind about how it's so clear to me that something is driving this, and of course we know that ultimately it's a spiritual darkness. It's evil, but that has been played out in human philosophy, right? And whether the people knowingly or not, it kind of doesn't matter, right? Satan can use people who think they're doing something good. And so I started thinking of Saul Alinsky. And then that led me to kind of a few other rabbit holes. And it's kind of interesting. And so I was thinking of rules for radicals. We're going to just hit those highlights here in a minute. Because I think when you read them, you realize, oh, that's kind of what's going on, right? Maybe there's been plans for this. But one thing that I think we all have to be careful of is, as I was looking at this, there was a really cool, convenient thing that popped up connected with Saul Alinsky that said 8 ways to tear down a country and make it socialist. So I started looking at that, and they're all you're like, oh, okay. But then you actually look, that thing is fake. Now it's taken from actual information, but it's compiled and attributed to Alinsky, which is false, which is stupid for us to do, because what it does is gives ammunition to people like Snopes and all these people that rate things as false. They can rate it as false even though the premise behind it is true, right? So again, we all have to make sure we are being truthful, and the way that thing was presented was not truthful, even though the information in it was. But anyway, that got me looking more at that, and those 8 premises are actually more closely associated with two professors, Cloward Piven. Going back into the 1960s, they wrote a book called The Weight of the Poor, A Strategy to End Poverty. And they have the idea of, okay, we want to change this system to a more fair, equitable system, right? So now, you would think people would be able to see history and how that doesn't work out well, but we're not that smart. And so they write this book, and it basically has these principles. And so I want to read those principles, and then Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and kind of how they go together. And we're not going to go deep into them because we'd be here forever, because you really could. But I think you'll see a picture that, again, for these individuals who don't understand why engaging in a culture war, that we should just step back and be nice. Okay, you can step back and be nice, but guess what? The other side is in a war, right? They want to destroy you. So you can sit there and take the moral high ground and say, well, we're just going to be nice, and then you're going to be destroyed. Is that really what the Bible would want us to do? I don't think so. I for sure don't think so. And if God wants to change my mind on that, he needs to be very obvious, right? But so here are the kind of the principles within and there's actually a whole strategy now. It's called the Cloward-Piven strategy. It's basically a Trojan horse to get in and to break down a system. And so it starts off, says to use class welfare to weaken the system to break the welfare state. Right? So they acknowledge, okay, and this was back in the 60s, so the welfare system is coming on board. Their goal in this book is, hey, we need to get more people on the system, because that way the system eventually won't be able to handle it, and it will break the system, and then you come in and replace it with something that you really want, right? So the second thing is to incite rebellion and socially motivated policy change, right? So just stir up stuff, get people going. It's the easiest way is to pit people against each other. The poor and the rich is the tale as old as time, right? And then race is right behind it. That you're always going to be able to incite people by making them victims. The next was to recruit massive numbers of the poor onto welfare rolls so as to overwhelm the system. So now you've got it started. Now you actually go recruit. You actually encourage people to get on to the system and to engage in the system. They predicted that this would cause a profound financial and economic and political crisis. So just right there, if you're coming up with something that your intention is to cause that, we really need to look closely at your motivations, right? I mean, because that's huge. If you are intentionally saying, we want to cause a crisis, I need to know why you're doing that. Because when the Declaration of Independence was signed, that caused a crisis, right? I mean, that was a big thing. So we need to know why they did that. What were the motivations behind it? Why are you willing to go to these lengths? And of course, we know that they felt, and rightfully so, that they had no other options. They had exhausted all other options, and it was time to throw off the oppressive system and to replace it with another one. Well, this is very similar, so we need to know, well, what's the motivation behind this if this is what you're claiming that you're wanting to do? It says, called for a cadre of aggressive organizers to use demonstrations to create a climate of militancy. How many random groups are there now that are just causing craziness, right? I mean, you know, again, you have the LGBT movement, you have the BLM, you have socialists, you have communists, you have all of these different groups that all are just causing chaos, and sometimes their values align and sometimes they don't. But it doesn't really matter if you're causing the chaos. They talked about calling for a threat of black violence to cause politicians to appeal to the federal government for help. So again, specifically using the black population as a tool. And, you know, I think, you know, we get so tired of hearing that everything is racist. However, the black community has been through way more than their fair share, and now being used kind of on the other side, right? That the ones who claim to be helping and want what is best are really just using them to keep them in a subservient place. It's a hard one, and we have to be really careful how we do engage with that, because racism is very real. It doesn't look like it did back in, you know, the 1950s. It's more sophisticated and maybe more deadlier now. Then the last is to orchestrate a media campaign to be carried out by the friendly left-wing journalists to float the idea of a federal program of income redistribution for working and non-working people alike. So that was their goal, is right, that they overtly stated this, that it's to get to a place where we redistribute income to everyone. So I mean, that's a socialist at best, communist. Eventually it has to be communist, right? Because if you're going to redistribute wealth, then the state has to own the land. You can't have private ownership of land and truly be able to redistribute wealth. So one leads to the next. So that is going on with this professor couple, and they're from Columbia. There's some interesting roots to Columbia as well. I thought about getting into that, but I was like, I have to do more, because I think you have some societies and stuff that started them that have their roots in very strong Marxist theory, right? It's out there. So that leads us to Saul Alinsky. He is known for his book, Rules for Radicals. And you kind of read through, and it kind of depends on how there's either 12 or 13 of them. I saw 2 different ones. It's basically principles and how you separate them out. And, you know, his defenders would say that he's only doing this so that it will help society, that the system is corrupt, the system is messed up, and so you work within the system to bring down the system. Again, it's like, well, what's the motivation? What are you going to replace that with? I understand, and man, the system, I am much more amenable to that argument that the system is corrupt today than I was 10 years ago. Right? So yes, the system is corrupt and it is messed up, but you got to be careful just throwing it away, because what are you going to put in its place? And so his rules, and I just want you to think about kind of what's going on, and see if you see some connections, that there are definitely people who have taken this to heart. Rule 1 was that power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. That's very interesting to me. It's a perception of power as well as power, and so you wield it as much as you can. And I think we're seeing that now, of how many people are kind of waking up in some ways too late to some of these agendas, that the actual bulk of the population did not agree with these radical agendas, but it's been perceived that they did, and so everybody was just kind of like, oh, maybe I'm the crazy one. I guess if that's where everybody believes, I'm just going to be quiet, right? So it's perceived power, but power is obviously very important. It says, never go outside the expertise of your people. Okay, well, it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? That means you create talking points, right? You give very specific bulleted points, and you hammer that home. right? If whenever you start seeing some of the arguments on whatever it is, people will stay in a very narrow, this is what I know, and they'll just kind of keep referring to that. That's very important to them, to never go outside the expertise of your people. And then, rule 3, whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. Here you want to cause confusion, fear, and retreat, right? So all of a sudden, just randomly introducing something completely different, right? And how many times do we see that, right? We were talking about gay marriage and gay rights, and then within a few years, we're talking about, can children have gender-affirming surgery? It's like, whoa, where did this come from, right? This kind of fits into that idea. Rule 4, make the enemy live up to their own book of rules. It says, you can kill them with this, for they can no more obey their own rules than the Christian church can live up to Christianity. And this is it's interesting. It's using the system against itself. And we see this within Christian, right? Like if you can't, how often do you get called hypocritical because you don't live up to all of the things that the Bible teaches? Well, we acknowledge that we can't. It's something we're striving for. But if you can use that against, and that has been used to discredit Christianity, and it's same thing with the government. There was an example that said, for example, if there's a rule that a congressman or somebody like that has to read every letter that comes in, send them 30,000 letters. What does that do? It immobilizes that, right? Because they've created this rule that they have to follow, and you use that rule to basically create chaos and immobilize the system. Which again, maybe that's why we have law books that are that thick, right? Because there's so many rules, and you can use those against the system itself. Rule 5, ridicule is a man's most potent weapon. Man, how much ridicule is there? And now with social media, this has been able to just be used. How many people are ridiculed? You give your belief and you say, oh, well, that's so bigoted. Why do you still have those racist tendencies, right? Ridiculing people. And it is effective. And it's not godly. That's the interesting thing, kind of going back to the thing that got all this started, is if you don't understand that you're at war, a spiritual battle, right? You're trying to be godly, and you're expecting the other people to kind of play within those godly rules. No, they're not, because guess what? They don't believe in God. In fact, it's an anti-God movement. But rule 6, a good tactic is one your people enjoy. Right? So make it fun to be an activist. Encourage people to get involved and to change the ways you work. That continues on to rule 7. A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. So you need to keep doing more things. Keep from all different directions. Just keep it moving. That goes into rule 8. Keep the pressure on with different tactics and actions, and utilize all events of the period for your purpose. So just use everything you can. You're trying to keep people in a state of chaos and pressure. Says the threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. I think the best example of this is like climate change right now, is that the threat is this huge cataclysmic event, right, that we're all going to burn up. In fact, it became really popular a few years ago that we only had 12 years left. I think we're down to 5 now since that happened. So, y'all get everything in order. Ironically, we could all end in 5 years, but not from climate change. It could be something else the Lord may return. But it's interesting to make things, the fear of something actually is worse than what it really is, right? So you just capture the imagination of people. Rule 10, the major premise for tactics is the development of the operation that will maintain a constant pressure upon the opposition. It is this unceasing pressure that results in the reactions from the opposition that are essential for the success of the campaign. Think January 6th. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Ugly reaction. Look what you're able to do. Right? And that's what keeping pressure does. And Rule 11 kind of fits with that. If you push a negative hard enough and deep enough, it will break through into its counter side. This is based on the principle that every positive has its negative. So you hammer the negatives, someone finally reacts in violence against the negative. People tend to support the underdog or the perceived underdog. And so now all of a sudden, oh, the LGBT community, look, they have been oppressed. They have been mistreated. So now we're going to support them. So what was once a negative now becomes a positive. So pretty impressive. Rule 12, the price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. You cannot risk being trapped by the enemy in his sudden agreement with your demand and saying, you're right, we don't know what to do about the issue, now you tell us. Thought this was interesting. So it's kind of that idea of always have a plan, always have something that you are going to be able to do. Don't necessarily compromise, always have an answer. So if they ever come to the table, then you have an answer for them. I think you can definitely see that within the political realm as you push and push so far, and then finally someone says, well, we'll come to the table with something, and then, oh, well, we can do it this way. Well, this way is what you always wanted to happen to eventually be able to get you over here. Right? And then the last one is pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Right? So that you start seeing things as the enemy. And so now you're focusing on individuals, not just institutions. Think of what is happening now with the word Christian nationalist. What are you doing? There's a phrase, Christian nationalist. Now we've been able to turn what that means. It's now connected with white supremacy, stuff like that. And now we're going to start strategically attacking and attaching that to individuals. Right? So it's a very effective method of radicalism. So again, we could spend hours going through those and how they lay out. But I think, to me, as I was just kind of casually, quickly reading through them, I was like, yeah, this is why people have thought about how to sow chaos and discord. This isn't something that is all that new. It's just being done in some ways in more effective ways because the tools are there for more effective ways. But the only way that you beat it is to at least recognize what's happening. And so I just encourage you to continue trying to nicely and respectfully wake people up that probably don't agree with this stuff so that they wake up to see what really is happening, because we truly are in a spiritual battle. And if we don't find a way to stand up and push back, this ideology will steamroll you. And I don't know exactly what that looks like on the other side. I just know historically it's never looked good. And it does end up causing a lot of death and destruction, because guess what? The adversary that we see all throughout Scripture, what did he come to do? To kill, to steal, and destroy. What do these systems eventually do? They kill, they steal, and they destroy. All right, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and hope that you stay warm. And you're supposed to be conserving energy right now, so good luck with that. All right. So have any of y'all read the whole book, Rules for Radicals? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've also read Rules for Reformers.
I was fixing to say that sounds like a little bit better. Well, I'll have to get that.
It takes
And
us
so
13 points and turns them around.
Well, I'll definitely have to get that and look at it.